So given a URL and a callback function. So what do we need to do inside this function? We need to fetch this URL, and once we have data, we want to. So you want to call this function back. So let's do it like this. So we have the URL from the parameter.
Can I ask what key did you press to have the immediate indenting?
Okay. So I use this plugin in Sublime called HTML Prettify. So if you.
How many plugins do you have?
That's why I asked.
The plugin guy.
So I use this Sublime HTML Prettify, and you have this in VS Code and all other.
Okay.
Any sensible editor will have plugin for this. Okay, so we have this. You make this request object, XHR object, and then you open this with the URL. And when you get the data, what do you do? So let's look at this function. So when you get URL and when you get callback, so the objective of this function is that it has to load the URL, and once it gets data from the URL, it has to pass that data to this function. So to make AJAX request, you first need this XML HTTP request object. So you create one, and then you add an event listener that when this data is loaded, then you want to do something. And then you add an event listener for.
I was not using the event listener for some reason, and it worked. What?
No, if you don't say this, then you will say request.onload equals something.
Yeah,
that's again event listener. So you have a load and error, and then you send the request. So right now we are going to use get method, and then you send the request. So when you send the request, after some time, it will get either this will happen or this will happen. So when error happens, you are saying server error has occurred, and then you can also throw this error depending on how you want to handle. Like if you throw this error, then you handle it somewhere else, or you can just log to the console. So if you throw this error, then as we saw previously, it will appear in your call stack. But if you put console.log, then it will not appear in the call stack. Then you have to look at the logs. So everything has its advantage and disadvantage. Console.error. And then if it's successful, if the load has finished, then you want to check for the status code. So when a HTTP server returns you a response, it will return you different response codes. So if it's a good response, if it's everything is good, it will be in range of 200, like from 200 to 299. And if what you are asking for has been changed for some reason, it will be in 300. If something is wrong with your request, it will be in 400 range. And if server error has occurred, then it will be in the 500 range, 500, 501, 502. So here we are using 200. If you want.
Why is there a range?
Yes, it's different if you get 202, for instance.
So suppose in the beginning when they introduced this HTTP API call, they knew about just 5 errors. So 401, 402, 403, 404. After 1 year, they realized that they need a new error code because the world has moved on, industry has evolved. Everyone is writing applications using this protocol, HTTP protocol, and they need to introduce a new kind of error code. So they reserve that, like maybe they are using from 200 to 222, and rest of it is unused. But in future, if they want to introduce a new HTTP error code, response code, they have that slot available. And if you want to read about HTTP status code, there is this whole Wikipedia page. And here also you see it says like this 2xx, 200, 201, 202, and like this 4xx in the range of 400. So if it's 200, it means okay, everything is good. If you're making a real application, you may be interested in something else also. But in this case, if it's not 200, it's not good for us. So we say that something went wrong. And if you know that, do you know about JSON? So let's call this function fetch JSON data. So we know for sure that this URL is going to return JSON, and then this is the response text. And if you have to convert it to JSON, what do you do?
Bring it back.
If you have to parse it from a string to, and then you call this function using, okay, so let's use this function with this OMDB API. So this is the API key which they have given me, and so as you can see, if I make this API call with this ID, there is some ID and my API key, they return a response for this movie, Guardians of Galaxy, and then you can see they have added a link to poster also,
Very good.
and then description from the IMDb page, who was the writer, what is the plot, in which language was this produced, in which country, and then IMDb rating is 7.7, how many people have voted, IMDb ID, type is movie, and something like that. And they also have a search endpoint. So like I was telling you, I can search for hello, and then it says that in 2015 there was a movie called Hello, My Name is something, and then hello something else, and then you have posters for everything.
So it's like each API has like its own documentation where they teach you how to.
Yes, so like I know that I have to put S here, and to know that what do I need to put,
Mhm.
in most cases you have to go to, like, you can just search on Google
Okay.
like a regular developer that,
They
yes.
can be very different. One.
yes,
from the
they
other.
can be very different. So
Okay.
here they have said that if you put I, it should be valid IMDb ID. If you put T, it should be something else.
Okay.
Like type, if you want to filter by movie,
Seriously.
Y, if you want to filter by year of release, and then it's their API, so they have.
Yeah.
And if you want to search, then this is about fetching a particular object. This is about searching everything,
Seriously.
and then you can, like, so there's some Indian movie. Anyway, so let's try this URL. Like if I search for God, it tells me city of God
Great movie.
and something something, and then there are total 1685 results in this search, but they don't return everything, because if they return everything it will be slow, and maybe you are not interested in everything. So if you want to go to next page, like here is the API key and then my search string God, and then if I want to go to page 2, I will have to say page 2 and page 3, page 4. So for the same search string it will load me, like you must have noticed that you have to click on next page, next page, next page. It's very similar to that. So do you know about Reddit? So if you go to Reddit, Reddit also has their API. So like if you go to Reddit programming, there's some information here, and then you can use Reddit API to find all details from very good. It's not found. There's some API for Reddit. It's a JSON API. So, but this API will be very different from OMDB. So every time you implement, you want to use some API, you have to go and read their documentation and then do something with that. So in this case, if we make this API call, we will get some data back, right? And then what do you want your callback function to do? So let's say in the beginning we just want to log it to the console. So what will happen now? We will call this function using this URL. It will create a XML HTTP request. Basically it's taking help of web API from the browser, and then after some point, if everything is good, you will get the response back, and then if it's valid JSON, this will pass. Then this logging will happen. So if you look at this, it returns as an object, and that object has 3 keys. One of them is response, like do you have anything in the response, and then they have an array called search and a search key, and then another thing called how many results do they have. So based on this you can determine in your code if you have to fetch more things, right? So right now I am going to use just this array, and we will try to render movies. So if I do data.search, it should return me just an array now, because I am accessing this key. And then now you have 10 objects, and each object has a poster, a title, and a type, and year, and other things. So if we had to show it here, how would you, if you had to use a table, then how would you do it?
There is a dot, and you write the key.
The first row would be header row, and let's say we wanted to have title and then poster. And then you would have body of the table, and here you would create one row for each object in this array, right? So it would be like this. you would have a TD, and title would be something like, I don't know, and then you would need an image tag. Something like this, and it will repeat for 10 times. Looks very ugly, but we need to do same thing using JavaScript now. So how do you create HTML elements using JavaScript? So if I have a table like this, in my case, we have to insert new rows here, right? So I can,
Give an ID.
you can give an ID to this table. What would be the ID of the table? Like movies list. And how would you get access to that HTML element? Its ID, so it would be hash movies table, and then I want to access the T body. Let's say, and I want to log it to the console.
So I will need to learn how to make tables. I will have to learn how to make tables. It was something I was procrastinating as much as possible.
You can use a UL, you don't mind. I'm just using tables. You don't have. I'm trying to teach you JavaScript and not HTML. I'm assuming that you already know how to make much more beautiful pages than what I can do here. So we have a T body and it does not have anything, so it does not return anything, but we know that we are getting access to this element, right? So let's say we have access to this, and then we know that this is a list of an array of movie objects. Then how do you iterate over an array?
For each.
And then let's say we wanted to log the movie object now. So now I'm getting 10 log statements, and before that I'm getting this thing. So we know that things are working, like it does not look pretty, but it works. So what do we need to create now? Now we need to create a new row. Or maybe just call it tr and then document dot and we want to add it to the T body. And then we need to create some TD. I like this other way to do, and then I will use this template literal syntax. So we want a TD with name of the movie, and that comes under movie.title. and then we want another TD with
Close.
Yeah, the first TD haven't closed it.
and it's called poster. Let's see. Of course. Okay, so it works. It looks like it works.
Yeah.
And if we change from God to Godfather, then also it works. Okay, so questions? No? Everything is very easy. Yes, so but this is not usable by the end user, because right now whatever we are fetching, it's hard coded in the URL. But
Mhm.
in a real application, you would want to have a input element,
Yeah.
and we generally use a form tag for that. No? Yes. And what do you have in a form? Input type text.
Something to add. You can input movie if you want. Or something. Search the movie you want. And the user will not know.
You are saying that we need to put a label also. And then it's so here you have something like type your query, and then if I type like God and I submit, it should submit, hopefully. So now it gets more tricky. So it's a form, and this is a button, and it's an input element, another input type text, and this is the form. So if you look at this thing, if I type anything and if I hit submit, it updates this thing here. It means that just because it's a form, and form has a default behavior. In form, if there is just one input and if you hit enter after typing, it will get submitted. So you don't need to click on this button. So you get all the benefits of what a form can do, what a, like how a browser treats a form. But if you had to use input and a button separately, then you would have to add event listener, like click on this submit button and then keyboard down, or when enter has been pressed in this input. And if you just wrap everything in a form, you can listen to the submit event on the form, and submit can be triggered by either clicking on this button, or submit can be triggered by clicking on, like hitting enter, or maybe if there is some other way, like whatever ways browser thinks that now it needs to submit the form. And so by default, when you submit a form, it gets submitted, but you want to prevent that, like you want to prevent the form, and you want to prevent the form submission, and you want to make a API call using whatever has been entered in the form. So first thing is that I will put some kind of ID here so that I can access it using DOM, search form, and const form equals search form. And then let's log it. So now I know that it works. Like, so I'm trying to refresh every time I'm changing even one line of code. And if you are writing your homework, like code for your homework, you should always refresh after changing one or two lines, so that you don't make enough. Like if you make lot of mistakes, then it becomes difficult to debug. But if you keep refreshing and keep looking at what has changed, then you find your errors like really fast. You will save lot of time. So now we have a form and we need to listen to the submit event on the form. So I don't remember, so I will just go and search for it.
Say submit veteran 0, veteran not.
So it says that submit is an event, and then it gets fired only on the form element. I don't find code. Okay, you can add an event listener here. So form dot add event listener, and then submit. Will be an event, and then and if you want to prevent the default behavior, you have to do this. And then next thing is finding how to get form data from the form. Get form data.
Sorry, I missed it. Why we wanna prevent the default?
Otherwise, it's just
I will
you want to
just
be the
get
same,
back to
like,
it.
just submit it and your URL is like becoming the super long, where something is also clear that. We don't want it to be really something.
There, like you're just getting the data.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I wasn't there.
So if you like, this is a form, right? Where did it go? So if you don't prevent the form, by default, JavaScript will like submit this form, and it does not know how to, if it's going to be an Ajax call or not. So forms have a default behavior, and if you want to change that default behavior and you want to implement it using Ajax, then you have to prevent the default behavior and then do something to fulfill that.
Okay.
So if I type hello now, what will happen? I will prevent the default event, and then there is something called form data class, and if you give it a target like this form, then it will give you a new data structure. So you can read about it, and I don't get anything in this form. What was the name of this? Name was search string, right?
You just need to get the value right.
Yes.
Then you just read the value. You don't need to have this new form data actually other than that.
Yes, that's another way, and this.
Yeah, it's just like gets query sector, and then it's ID, and then dot value, and you get it.
Yes, so there is this other way as well, that you.
Yeah, it's also like you need to access the DOM.
So this is much more cleaner than using DOM. So here, like I'm not even doing any DOM. I'm just relying on this form, and I know that this form has an input called search string, and this is the name of the input. So in future, if someone is going to reformat this form and they need remove id and like remove other things, maybe add some class name, etc., but if they don't change this like name of this field, then my code will work. So if you use DOM for getting data instead of using form data like event.target and form data, so this code is more stable than the other code, because I'm relying on just one thing, that if I have this form, my search string is by this key. The name of the input should be search string, and I want to get its value. So this code is much cleaner. So we have some. Now we have it, so we can build our URL. So and once you have the URL, you want to fetch the JSON data, right? So if I type search is for God, if I type so see, if I type a random thing, I get an error. So but if I type something correct, oh, it's adding in the end, so that's the problem. So you want to clear the body. So if I type sometimes, if you like, if I search for a Hindi movie, I may not get result. So in some cases the API call will fail. So if you're relying on a third party API, sometimes it may not give you results as you expect. You need to handle that case also. So let's look at this. So if you want to debug what XML HTTP request is being sent by your browser, like if I'm going to type 3 here and if I click on submit, if you go to your developer console and if you filter all the network requests by XHR, it will just show you the API calls made using Ajax. And then here it says too many results. So it means that if you go to this API, and then we need to find out how to limit results. There's no option, it seems. So So if you look here in the response, it says too many results, right? So a good way would be to pass this error to the user. So in the cases where you get the response, response is equal to true, and in cases where you don't get the response, response is false. So we can, when we get the data here, if equals false, then do something else.
This is much easier to handle with promises, right? I'm asking.
Don't ask the next month's question.
Maybe yes.
Maybe.
So like I am just doing a hack that if I put something bad, then it's alerting me that there are too many results. And if I type something very funny, it will say movie not found. And if I type something good, it will return me some results. But we are seeing some response, right? So, and we should clear this. Now when you build a form, you need to decide when do you want to clear existing results. So it may make sense to clear it even before sending the AJAX request. That you want to clear everything, and then, so this is where a designer will come into play. They will tell you that when, like, what is a good user experience. So like in this case, you are seeing results from the previous query, but if I type something bad, it will clear it and it will show me a dialog. So you can do a lot of things, but like this is one way to do it. I'm going to share this code, and after the break you need to do something. So your task would be that when you click on this movie, or I click on this poster, if you look at this response, each movie object has this IMDb ID. And if I type I equals this, it like same API key, but if I pass the I equals the IMDb ID, it gives me just one object back, and it has things like ratings, number of votes, and other things. So the task is that when I click on a movie poster, on the right side, or maybe at the top, maybe before this, I don't know where, you need to show more details. It may be a button that you click here and then more details come here, and you click here and more details come here. So make another API call and show more information. This is part of the homework. So it may take up to 1 hour. Like we will help you. I have been talking for last 2 hours. So I will just push this code on GitHub and we will start after the break.
Sounds good.
I feel like with API we can conquer the world.
Yeah, this is the first thing that say like, man, I can